Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're in Masechtas Gittin Daf Yud Daled. We are going to begin on Yud Daled Amud Aleph, about 8 lines from the top, in which we said that there's Hani Tlas Mili. There's actually 3 things that Shavinu Rabbanan Kehilcha Sabul Taima, that there are certain laws, even though maybe we don't have an exact understanding as to the reason behind them, nonetheless the Chachamim instituted them. On this, Rashi said, Ki'ilu kibul Moshe halacha Sinai shein tzarich lases batam. So, chada ha. One of them is that which we already mentioned in yesterday's daf, namely the din of Mamid Shloshtan, the din that not only by Pikadon, where the item is here, but even in a situation where the item is not even here because of Milvas Lahotsan Nisna, when it comes to a loan, it's considered like it's already gone. And therefore, because of that, it's hard to understand how a person can make a kinyan with something that doesn't exist. And therefore, that, even though we were grappling over how it's possible, we ended up just establishing that this is what the Chachamim say, even though we don't have an absolute concrete reason behind it. Be'idach, what's the second one? And this, by the way, is going to be question TB12. Elu Gilmul Devarim Shavinu Rabbanan Kehilcha Sabul Taima. So again, one of them is the din of Mamid Shloshtan, that if A owes B and B owes C, A can pay directly to C, provided that all 3 of them are present. So what is this other one? He says the name is Shmuel. If you have a person that writes all of his possessions to his wife, well, he's really making her is an apitrapa. Says Rashi, for her to be able to have the authority to go in and out into all the business dealings of all this money. Even though it was really written as a gift, lo kanasan, she actually doesn't acquire everything. Ve'ein Talmud, it doesn't really make sense. Galkach tiknu, this is what was established by the Chachamim, the Hefker base and Hay Hefker. So even though you would think maybe she should have all rights to it, doesn't make any difference. The Chachamim say that is not the situation. Ve'idach, and a third thing that's mentioned is the Amr of Hananya. Hamasi Isha Livno Gadol, a person marries off a girl to his oldest son. So we say, Bibayis Kanu, the son will be able to get a house. Says Rashi, Bayis Hamiyuchid, Shenu Darba, El Osolo Lebeis Chasnos. So this is an interesting thing, that there is part of the deal that your oldest son ends up getting a house. It's a pretty good deal. Now, all these things, again, don't have any basis in halacha, but as far as there is halacha, but there's no reason for it. Tosfos gives us a little bit of insight. Perish. Masha moyel liknois avol tam yesh yesh. So why do we allow this? It's a way of reducing paperwork, of minimizing. Instead of A having to go to B and B going to C and all of this, let it just be done with, and therefore it can be done quickly. So in order to not have to have new and extra kinyanim, they were able to circumvent the issue and to be able to do things more efficiently. Furthermore, Tosa says, you write all your things to your wife, Mishum Delo Shavik Libre, he didn't leave anything for his son, V'yoiv Lachrini, Vein Derech Lasos Kain, Elachalik Lakavoid, he's doing it to give her honor, Lemnoisa Pitrapa. In other words, if he has children, it's hard to imagine he's going to give everything to his wife. Why would he do that and give a gift up to his wife, everything, and leave his children, all of his heirs, out? So therefore, we kind of read into the situation, and we say probably he just meant to make her into an apotropos. And then finally, Tosfos says, "Omasi ish lebno kisha'av meiser kol ma sheyeshlo min abayis samcha lehidaita deben." So it says that when the father gives over everything that is from his house, it's reliable, it's understood that his intention is to give the house to his son. So, okay. So that's, again, trying to give some reasoning as to why he would do this. Again, this was the custom. But again, it's a hilchos taima. Fine. So, Omerle Rav Acha Bardala, Kaba de Marika Isli Gaboch. He said, a kav, a measure of saffron, I have by you. So you have something of value of mine. So Yehoyev Lepoini. So instead of you giving it to me, give it to someone else. Ba'apeh in front of him. Kaminulach dul had ranabi. And I'm not going to be retracted. So Rashi says, Hashas Agadenta Hachiyamale Bifanav, he's saying this in front of him, Ani Maftichacha, I trust you, Shaloi Echserbi, that you're not going to retract. Now, the fact that he said this is I trust you, is that sounds like he actually has the ability to retract. He actually could. These are things that are not given over to changing one's mind. Says Rashi, Kivan deba'apei kaminalach, since it was done in front of you, the titve nihile sulo matzi hadranabi, I can no longer retract. Ha'amarav chada zimna, but he said this before. Diamarav hu namarav manali bi'adcha tanale ploini b'mamashlashan kana. This is exactly the same situation. So why would we think that this is any different? By the case of the saffron, this is literally a case of Mamad Shlosh, that he can't retract. Now, if it was that case, maybe you would think that you need everyone to be in front of one another, like, for example, a mana, which is a significant amount of money, so maybe everyone has to be there. If it's something which is not so much lowly boy befanav, that we would not require that this kinyan would have to be done in the presence of all three people. Kamash one, even by a matana muetas, it's necessary. Says Rashi, the kavan de marika, when it comes to a kav, a measure of saffron, apparently that's a matana muetas. Boy nami ba'peh. The chiddush is that even in that situation, it needs to be done in front of all three parties. Hanu ginoi. There was these owners of gardens, says Rashi, Bali Gina, Meichri Yarak, and they sold vegetables. The Ovid Chushbana Bahadiadadi, they were making calculations and business with one another. Posh Chamish Istri Zuzi Gabichan Minayu. So it was left over an extra 5 Istrim of Zuzim by one of them. Omerle Yahavinu Nihile Lomore Ara. Can you do me a favor and take this money and give it to this person, to the owner of the land? So Rashi says, Shabbat Selit Suri, the Hainu Chatzi dinner. So this was a half a dinner. And he said, could you give it to such a person? Says Rashi Kolomer, Amrullah, he said to them, Ba'apeh, in front of him, Ba'api Marim Aron, in front of the owner of the land, Yahavinu Nihile, Lamari Ar, give it to him. Ba'api Mari Ara, V'kanamine. And he was able to be kainet through what's called a kinyan of chalipin. L'sof, at the end, Ozol, he went, Avad Chushbana, he made a calculation, being Dilei Lanafshe, by himself. L'posh Gabe V'lomidi, he actually didn't leave anything, so maybe it was a mistake that there was extra. What should we do? First of all, we have this din that he said that it's a kinyan. Va'od hakanu minach, he was already kainet from you. So it turned out that they didn't have the extra 5 coins as they originally thought. So the question is, the problem is that, yeah, but there was a kinyan done. Amalei Rabba atu what? Hi, mika armor lo yahavina. Is it that he said, I don't want to give? Deleka gaboy karmer. He says that he doesn't have these coins. Amalei imkain kinyan bataisu. Obviously, therefore, it means the whole thing was a mistake. The whole kinyan batais chayzer. And therefore, because of that, he is able to retract. Okay, Itmar. So now we're going to spend most of this daf dealing with the din of hoylech. What is the din of hoylech? So hoylech of a person basically makes this declaration of, again, going to the shliach. He says that I want you to go with this item. Hoylech mana laponi. Basically, bring this $100 to Pliny. Shani chayvo because I owe him money. So Omarav chay b'achriyuso. So the lova. So you have the borrower over here that he owes $100. So instead of him giving the money directly to the malvet, to the lender, he gives it to a shliach, and he tells the shliach, "Do me a favor, and hoylech, take this money and bring it to the malvet." So the question is, while this money is in transit, while it's traveling to the malvet, the question is, if something happens to this money along the way, does the lova have an obligation to somehow come up with more money? So, Chaya b'achruso. Says Rashi, HaMishaleach, the Mishaleach is referring to the one who appointed the Shleach, namely in this case the lova, the borrower. this guy is going to be chayav b'achriyuso. Says Rashi, if some accident happens, say he gets robbed or something like that, totally beyond his control, so the lova now has to produce another $100, because the fact that it was in the hands of the shliach, which is what we were talking before, it's not considered like it's in the hands of the malvi yet. The imbo lachs are in a chayzer. However, interestingly enough, that if, let's say, while it's in transit, Rav somehow, for some reason, holds that since it is in transit, it doesn't make any difference. He now has no authority, the lova, the borrower, has no authority to retract. Shmuel, 1 second. I agree that the lova is still obligated until the shliach actually hands it over to the malva. But since he's going to be chayav if it gets lost, so therefore, obviously, it's still considered to be the lova's until it's given over. So therefore, the truth is, what should actually be is that he should be able to retract, because the very fact that he is chayav b'achriyuso is proof that it's still in the lova's hands. So if it's the lova's, it's considered ki'u, like it's in the lova's hands. So the din should be that even when it's in the shliach's hands, he should be able to be chayzer. So we have this machlokas Rabbi and Shmuel, not about being chayav b'achriyuso. In this situation, everyone holds that the lova is chayav to pay to come up with new monies. The question is he allowed to be chayzer? So perhaps their machlokas is based on the following: the Mar Savar hoylech kazachidami. The fact that you said the word hoylech, that actually has the din of as though you said that this person should be zaycha. Says Rashi. So who is this? This is Rav, because Rav said you can't retract. Why can't you retract? Says Rashi, hilchach eno chayzer umiyu chay bi'achriyuso. So it's like you're zoichet for this person. Therefore, you can't retract anymore the lova. The reality is the malva didn't say that I want this shliach. He's not the one that appointed the shliach. The lova did. The lova is the one that gave the $100. So therefore, it shouldn't be the malva's problem that it got lost along the way. So therefore, the lova still has to reimburse. But the fact that he said hoylech, that's ki'ilu, like he said zoicha. So this is the whole question. According to Shmuel, he is of the opinion that no. The reality is he could be chayzer, because even though he said hoylech, it's lav kazachidami, and therefore, in this situation, he didn't mean hoylech to mean zoicha, because he, the lov, is still chay b'achriyuso. So therefore, he realizes that until you give it over to the malva, I have the ability to retract. Okay. No, well, really, maybe everyone holds hoylechas kazachidami. So 1 second. If everyone holds hoylechas kazachidami, so then how is it possible that Shmuel can say that you are able to retract? We don't say migu. Amrinan migu. So migu, what is that? So look at Rashi. Ba'alma hoyel kazachidami. V'im hayu b'matana. If we're dealing with a gift, the leik achrayos, where there is no achrayos, because if I give you a gift and it gets lost along the way, I don't have to give you another gift. It's being nice. In that situation, even Shmuel will agree that he's enu chayzer. He's not going to retract, because he holds hoyel kazachidami. So the second you give him a gift, that's it. You can't retract. Why? Because the only reason why Shmuel said that maybe you could retract is because you're chai b'achrayusai. But if when it comes to matana where you're not chai b'achrayus, so as soon as you give it over to the shliach, even Shmuel holds that the din is that you're going to have to, that you cannot retract. So Shmuel said migu. So Shmuel, who says that he can still retract in the case of a loan, is mitosh chai b'achrayus, since he's migu, that's what it means, that since he's chai b'achrayus, ibo lachs chayzer. So that's all it means. That the concept of migu is, do we say that since, according to the opinion of Rav, he does not hold a migu, right? Because he holds, we don't say that just because you're chai b'achrayus means that it gives you the ability to retract. Okay. Tanik of us to Rav. So we're going to now support the opinion of Rav that in this situation, even though it's true that the lova is obligated to pay back or pay another $100 if it gets lost along the way, but he cannot retract. How do we see this? So give this money. He says hoylech. Tain mana leploni. And we're going to focus on the words tain. Give this money to ploni, shani chayvlo. Right? So you can say it that way. Or, hoylech mana leploni, pikadin shesh lo biyadi. Then give this $100 to ploni. It's a pikadin. It's a safekeeping that he had in my hands. Or, tain mana leploni. Again, it doesn't matter he says hoylech or he says tain. It apparently doesn't make any difference. Tain mana leploni, pikadin shesh lo biyadi. So in this case, chay b'yachriuso, which is what we established, and everyone holds that that's the case. The Levit still has to pay back if it gets lost along the way. But how do we see, like the Shita of Rav, because it says clearly the im ba lachzar eno chayzer. It says clearly that you're not chayzer. So we see clearly like the opinion of Rav. So the question is pikadon. So we were talking about before a case of a milva, of a loan. And then this case also talks about that there's no difference also by pikadon. So he didn't actually lend you the money. All he did was have some safekeeping in your house, and now you're giving it over. So says the Gemara, Pikadain Lemele, why don't we say that we should tell the Shliach, why can't he say, I do not want the Pikadain in someone else's hands, says Rashi. We're going to see later on. The reality is that since if I trusted you, but I didn't necessarily trust the shliach, I don't know anything about him. So the question is that since it was given over to him, it's a chov. So the only time we may say that the shliach is zoicha, that he can actually acquire something, because ho'ach is where he actually has the ability to acquire it. But in this situation, we shouldn't say that's the din, because the reality is the person who had the pikadon, who gave the pikadon to you, he trusts you. He doesn't trust this other guy. He doesn't know this other guy. So this shliach should not have been able to have been koined at all, which means that in that situation, why can he not retract? Because the shliach certainly, according to him, should not have had any kinyan. Some Rab Zera kishahuksuk kafron. We're talking about a situation where the person who had it is someone who is not a trustworthy person. He's a liar. Says Rashi, once he found out that, I gave my pikadon to this guy, he'll be thrilled to know that it's now in the hands of the shliach, because he knows that this other person is a chuksa kafran. He doesn't want him to hold on to the pikadon, and therefore, because of that, so he would be very happy that this shliach should be koined. And therefore, because of that, we may say, because of the case of chuksa kafran, that this is what this whole case is talking about by pikadon, that the shliach is koined. Rav Sheshes Havile Ashtarta Ditsar Boli B'Mechoiza. So Rav Sheshes had debts on coats in Mechuza. Says Rashi, Hakafa Shenasan Sarbolim Ba'ashroi Wasesel Hamaisel Isman Kavua. So again, he had to pay back this debt. Armalelu Rav Yosef Bar Chama, so he said the following: Bahadi de Osis Asinhu Nihale, that while you're coming, bring me my money. Azal Yahavinalahu, so he went and gave it to him. Armalei Nikni Minoch, can you acquire it from me? Says Rashi, why? Unsa de Orcha, in order to avoid an accident, getting lost on the road. Di Misnase Minoch. That if it gets lost, then you can't claim it anymore. So okay, fine, I'll do this. I'll be kind it from you. Well, Saif at the end, shtamit luhu, he was avoiding him. So Kiyasal Game went to him. Shaprab to delay Shavis Nafshach Evid Loivel Ishmalva. It's good, says Rashi, Delo Shibad to Atzmacha Al Chinam, that you didn't put this upon yourself for no reason. To hate Eved, and all of a sudden you're like becoming like a slave, that you have this responsibility. Lish Nachrina, another interpretation, Shaper Avta, you did well. Eved Loivel Ishmalve. This, so they are the slaves. So let them take the responsibility. Okay, let's actually see question 1. So the question 1 says, Hoylech man l'ploini pikadain, sheyesh lo biyadi, ha'im chayzer v'im chay b'achriuso, v'mahadim b'muchsa kafra. So as we said, we make this distinction. So if you say Hoylech man l'ploini pikadain, so chayzer, he could retract, and he is chay b'achrayus. However, huchsa kafran, that's a machlokas Rav and Shmuel, if he can be chayzer, but still he'll be chayiv b'achriuso. So again, he's always going to be chay b'achrayus. But the question is that if we're dealing with Chuksa Kafran, so maybe in that situation, you cannot be Chayzer because he wanted this Kinyan to take place. However, if it's a case of not a Chuksa Kafran, then you would be Chayzer because the person can say, I didn't want this Pikadon in the hand of someone else. Okay. Back in the Gemara. So Rav Achai bar Rabbi Yeshaya Havile Ispaka de Kaspa ben Harda. So he had this, Rashi says, Ispaka, a vessel, a kli, which was of silver and Harda, which sounds to be of some great value, as we continue to Yodal and Beis. Armelahu l'Rav Dostoi b'Rav Yanai l'Rav Yosi bar Kefar. He said to these people, he said, Bahadei de Asisu, when you come, Asui Nihile, go and bring this to me. Ozul Yahavi Nihile brought it to him. Hey, Niknimi Naichu, can you be kind it for me? So Armelahu, low. No, that much I'm not gonna do. So this is what he said. Says Rashi, Kedamrino El, Imbo Lachser in a Chayzer. Says no, because which, as we said before, if you wish to retract, you cannot retract. So Armelahu Ahadrin Nihile. So if that's the case, give the Kli back. So Rav Dostoi bar Rabbi Yanai Amar Lahu in, yes, take it back. Rabbi Yosi bar Kefar Amar Lahu lo, no, don't take it back. Havika mitzarale, he was causing him problems. Amar Lei Chazimar Hechika Ovid. So how'd you do this? So Amar Lahu Tav Ramule, says Rashi, Harbe Hakuhu, literally it means like he was hit many times. Kiyasa Ligdabe Amar Chazimar Lumistaya de lo Sayan El Armeluhu Nami Tav Ramule. Not only did he give the Kli back, I, who didn't, he encouraged them to hit me. Armelia my Tavid Hachi, why'd you do this? Armelia Oisin B'nei Adam Hein Ama, the Koivan Ama. These are people who are strong, powerful people. They dress in a very special way. They're big hats. V'koivan alma umedabrin mechetziehen, and they speak from their halves. As Rashi Kloimer koilin ava, they have thick, deep, dark voices. V'nira hadibur yoytze b'tiburan. It sounds like it's coming from their stomachs. V'shemaysein mivoholin, and even their names are scary. Ardav Arta Ufili Baresh. So Rashi says, these are names. Oimrin Kafuhu, so they said, tie him up. Koivsin Oimrim Hargu Hargan. If they say tie him up, they'll tie him up. If they say kill, they'll be killed. Il Hargu Estu Stoi, and if they would kill of the Stoi, mi Nosan Liyanai. Ababar Kamoini, then who is going to come like me? So basically what he was saying was the issue is that the person that we're dealing with is someone who is extremely difficult to deal with, and therefore that's the reason why he paskin as he did. Armale b'nei Adam halolu kodoivim malchus hein. These people actually are very close to Malchus. Armale hein yeshul hen susim paradim. Do they have horses and mules and all these things that go after them? Therefore, you actually did the right thing. So that is, again, in the situation, because you're dealing with these very difficult people, so the din was adjusted. So going back to what we said before, if a person doesn't say zoich, but he says hoylech manal ploni, giving this money to ploni, give this money to ploni, b'holech ubikshu, but instead of the whole issue of getting lost, he actually got to the guy's house, but he wasn't there. V'lomatsu, so tanicha da yasu l'mashalech. The question is, what do you do with this money? So he should just give it back to the original guy. They got to the person because he couldn't find the malva. To give it back to the lova. The tani idach yarshim yishin. Maybe you should give it to the yarshim. Yarshim yishin. So the question is, who do you give it back? Who do you give it back to? The mashalech or the yarshim? So lema b'hakmifli the marsava hoyel chazachi. If you're going to give it to the Yarshim, it's because maybe you hold Hoyel Chazachi, and therefore it's like the Malva is already coined. So you can't give it back to the Lova, and if you can't find the Malva, give it to his Yarshim. Umar Saba Hoyel Lav Kazachi. And the other one says, no, it's a Lav Kazachi, and therefore you should give it back to the Lova. So Omer Rav Ab, so again, this was the basis on what we've been discussing before. So Omer Rav Abu Bar Mabul, no, the Kulayim Hoyel Lav Kazachi. Really, it's Lav Kazachi. So it's Lav Kazachi, then you should give it clearly back to the borrower. So why does it say give it to the Yarshim? Lukasha Hababari Habishchimira. So if we're talking about a case where he's a Bari, so says Rashi, Yachsu L'Mishalech, give it back to the Lova. Dehoyach Lav Kazachi Dami, because the Shlech wasn't kainit. V'zeh Lo Shalchu El Makabel Lo Yarshav. He only wanted to give it specifically to the Malva and not to his Yorshim. So don't give it to him. However, if we're talking about the case of a Shchimira, so that in that situation we'll say you should give it to the Yorshim. Rav Zvid Omer Haba B'Shchimira. Actually, we're talking about a Shchimira, because even though normally we say Hoylech is maybe Lav Kazachi, but if it's a Shchimira, in there we say that what his words are like kinyanim, and therefore maybe it should be given over to the Yorshim. So if the case is that both cases are Shchimira, so then you would maybe think, okay, fine, that's why you should give it to the Yarshim. So then why would you possibly think that it should go back to the borrower? So Hadi Isal Makabel B'Shas Matan Mais, Hadi Leisa Kabel B'Shas Matan Mais. The question is, was he alive at the time that he accepted the money? Says Rashi. Hadi Isal Makabel B'Oyum, he was alive B'Shas Matan Mais. V'Shliach Zacha Behen. So if the Malva, let's say, was alive at the time when the Shliach accepted the money from the borrower, so therefore it's going to go to the Yarshim. However, if the Malva was already dead, and the Lova and the Shliach didn't know that he had died, and then the Lova gave the money to the Shliach, this whole Zechiyah was really through a mistake, and therefore the Yarshim will not be kainet. Okay. So it's all totally on whether the guy is alive. So at the time he said to give it, the man was already dead, so it goes back to the original guy. Actually, maybe we're talking about the case that the guy was healthy. So if it's healthy, then we should definitely give it back to the original person. So hademes makabel b'chay noisen, hademes noisen b'chay makabel. So the question is, now they're both dead, right? So now one is that the makabel died while the noisen, the giver, was still alive, and the other one is the case where the noisen, the giver, died before the makabel. So based on that, says Rashi, demes noisen, if the giver died first, right, while the makabel was still alive. So in that situation, so we should say, says Rashi, mitzvah kaim dever hames, v'efil ha'ibari. Even though he was healthy, but he can be healthy and still die, and that's what happened. So therefore, maybe we'll say mitzvah kaim dever hames, and therefore, because of that, we're going to say that it should go to the Yarshim. However, if let's say the Malva died first, so the lender, the one who was giving it, he was still alive, so we're not going to say mitzvah l'kaim divrei hameis in that situation, and therefore it goes back to the borrower. So leima hoyel kazachi tanahi. So these are all the other possible interpretations of how to be able to answer these questions. But let's say that hoyel kazachi is actually a machlokas tanaim, the sanya. So he went, and he couldn't find the guy. So again, it goes back. Why does it go back? Must be because we hold that hoylech is lav kazachi, and therefore it goes back to the original guy. Meis mishalech. What if you go back to the original guy and he's also not around because he's dead? So Rav Nasim, Rav Yaakov Omer Yachsul Yarshim Mishalech. In that situation, okay, fine, the Mishalech died, but still he wasn't Zoichet. So instead of it going now, giving it back to the original person who gave it to you, give it to his Yarshim. No, you should go back to the person you couldn't find and give it to his Yarshim. So in Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Misham, Rabbi Yaakov, Misham, Rabbi Meir, he said, mitzvah kan divra meis. He said it's a mitzvah to listen to the words of the mace. The Chachamim say you should divide it, right? So what else are you going to do? The kan omru, and here it said in Babel, kol ma sheyirtza shliach yasa. Whatever the shliach wants to do, let him do. Exactly what does that mean? It's hard to understand. So Rabbi Shimon Hanasi, al yadi hayemaisa. This actually happened in my life, this story. Omru, when I said Yaxul Yoshim Mishalech, I think you should give it back to the Yoshim of the Mishaleach, which means, therefore, he holds that these people were not Zoichet. So my law, you have all this machlok. The Tanakama Savar Hoyach Lav Kazachi. So the Tanakama, who says that it should go back to the Yoshim Mishaleach, is because he wasn't Zoichet, and therefore it goes back to the original person. Because even though he said Hoylech is Lav Kazachi, Rav Nasin, Rav Yaakov, Nami Hoylech Lav Kazachi, he agrees, V'yafagav the mace, even though now the guy's dead, Lo Amri the mitzvah kind of mace. We don't say it's a mitzvah to listen to the words of the mace, and therefore it will still go back to the Yorshim of the Mishalech. The Yeshomim Hoylech Kazachi, the Yeshomim hold Hoylech Kazachi, and therefore it does go to the Yarshim Nishtalchulo. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi Omer Misham Rabbi Yaakov Shem Misham Rabbi Meir Hoylech Lav Kazachi Miu Heichen the Mace. When he died, Amrin Mitzvah Kam Devar Mace, and therefore it should be given to the Yarshim of the person he was sending it to. Chamim Armim Yachloku. Why? Because Masafkahu. He has no idea what to do. He's not sure. He's in doubt, so he divide it. V'kan amru shuda dedaini, and here he'll hold the din of shuda dedaini, which basically allow the shliach to decide what's the best thing to do. Rav Shimon Hanasi masa osalash me'inan, and he's just coming to tell us the story that unfolded in his lifetime. So perhaps all of this machlokus is all weaved within this discussion of whether we say Hoylech is Kazachi. Gemara says, "Lo, bibari de kolim lo pligi." If we're dealing with the person who gave it, who sent it to the shliach, and he was healthy, no one argues. Says Rashi, "De lav Kazachi dami." If this guy is a bari, in this situation you can't find him, it definitely goes back to the original person because Hoylech is lav Kazachi. So then what's this whole machlokes talking about then? We're talking about a situation where the person who gave this to the shliach was dying. Did not. And the machlokes is whether or not we consider what exactly we do. So Rashi, according to Rabbi Lezer, that maybe he'll consider like a shemira like the same din as a bari, or maybe a shemira has a different din, as we're going to see right now. It has nothing to do with this concept of Hoylech is Kazachi Dami. Maybe everyone holds Hoylech is Lav Kazachi Dami. So rather it's based on the following Machlokas Rabbanan V'Rabbanan. Did not. Hamachalk Nechasiv Al Piv. A person who's dividing up his possessions with his mouth, says Rashi, Al Pi Savaso. He's giving a command. Says Rashi, Machalok Nechasim Bavanav. He's dividing up his possessions with his sons. V'Lokish Shar Hamorishim Shacholkim Heirushim Mishavet. Not the way that normally it would be done in equal, but this guy has certain things specific for certain kids. So Belezer Omer, Echad Bari V'Echad Masukin, whether or not this man who is giving this Savah about the Yerusha, whether or not he's healthy or dying or sick, Nechasim Shesh Amachrayis, when it comes to Karka, Niktim Kesim V'Shtar V'Chazaka, you actually have to do a full-fledged kinyan. which means even though this man is sick, dying, according to him, it doesn't make any difference. When it comes to Matata and Mashicha, we know that is how Kinyanim take place. In other words, we don't care. In order for this to actually work, a Kinyan needs to take place. By Karka, as we know, Kesef, Shtar, Chazaka, when it comes to Matalton, you have to pull it, you have to do Mashicha. Since we're dealing with a Shchimira, Karka and Metaltalin, just whatever he says, that's it. So they don't have to actually do an actual kinyan. So again, we see over here the power of a Shchimira is his words considered to be like it's like a zchus itself. So it was such a story. She was sick. The Amra, and she said, Tinatein, as we continue to test Vav and Aleph, Kivi Nasi, give my brooch, Libiti, to my daughter. Vihi Bishneim Aser Mana, which is obviously a great amount of money, 12 mana. Umesa, and then this woman died. Vikima Chachamim Estevareha, and they established whatever she said, which means that we said Amira alone works. So we see that this is really the whole machlokas. We're talking about the person who was a shchimira, he was dying, and therefore the question is, do we say that a shchimira's words is like a kinyan in itself? And therefore, if that's the case, when the shliach now takes it, he doesn't actually even have to give it to the guy. It's automatically given to him or to his yorshim. Or do we say, like the shita of the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, that he says no, that there's no din like that. You still have to be kainin. Since there was no kinyan, so it goes back to the original guy. So B'nai Roichel, so they said B'nai Roichel tikbarem imam, which literally means the mother is buried. It says Rashi klolahi. It's a curse. Kolimer lo yalu alev. Don't put in your heart. V'lo yizachu bebeis hamedrash lo raya. Don't use this as a proof. These are wicked people. They used to keep thorns in the vineyard. He considered this to be a form of a forbidden mixture in the fields. Don't learn from them. You're not supposed to learn, oh, this is the proper way of dealing with Yerusha. Don't learn from them. These are not people that keep Torah. We don't even want to mention their name in the Beis Medrash, this person. Okay. Tanakama, Rabbi Lezer. Rav Nasan, Rav Yaakov Nami, Rabbi Lezer. That again, that it's not considered to be, even by a shchimira, it doesn't make a difference. It's considered to have the same din of a bari, and they actually have to be kainit. And therefore, hoylach in itself is not kazachi. Afagad, the mace, and even if the guy dies or is dying, so the Yeshomrim hold like the Rabbanan, which holds that we do listen to the king. This is considered like a kinyan. That even the words of a shchimira is considered like it's written down. It was considered like given over. And even if the mishalech died, we still say it should be given to his yorshim. Okay. For Rabbi Yehuda, Nasi Shemrim B'Shem Rabbi Meir Kabel Lezer, Umiyu Heichad Ameis, where he died, and Rina Mitzchayim Zem Ameis. So Chachamim, when they say Achloku, because Masaku, again, they don't know, so split it. The Khan Omer Shud Adif, and therefore they say maybe Shud Didani. Either again it should be split, or maybe Shud Didani. You should choose the right person who you think is the right person. Rabbi Shimon and Nasi Masas Lashmi'inon. This is come tell you the story. Okay, so again, Lav Dafka, is it based on the concept of Hoel Kazachidami? Maybe it's totally on whether either, again, this notion of Misacham Devar Meis, or whether or not the din of a Shchimira, that his words are considered as though it was Ksum K'Masun. Iboilhu. Fine. So, let's look at question, let's just finish the parak, and then we'll see a bunch of questions. Iboilhu. Rav Shimon HaNasi, Nasihu. So when it says Rav Shimon Hanasi, that's what it says over here. Rav Shimon the Nasi. Was he the Nasi? Or Mishmei the Nasi Kaimer? Or was it in the name of the Nasi? We're just trying to understand exactly who this person was. So Tashma, the Rav Yosef, Halacha Rav Shimon Hanasi. It says clearly the halacha is like Rav Shimon Hanasi. So what does that mean? So the halacha is like Rav Shimon Hanasi. So let's go back. What did Rav Shimon Hanasi say? probably worthwhile knowing what Rav Shimon HaNasi said. So Rav Shimon HaNasi said, again, Al Yedei Havi Maisa, the story happened. V'omer Yaksul Yarshim Mishalech, and they said, give it back to the Yarshim of the Mishalech, which means either we can learn from that, either, as we said, that Hoyach is a Lav Kazachi, or that the din of a Shchimira is the same thing as a Bari, and therefore he wasn't Kainit. And we don't say Mitzvah Kaim Dever Meis. Apparently all that. Okay. V'yadayin Tiboilach. We still have a question. Nasihu O Dikarmer Mishmei de Nasi Teku. Guf Om Rav Yosef, getting back. Halacha Rav Shimon HaNasi. The halacha is Rav Shimon that it goes back to the guy. So if you hold Divri Shchimir Kusum Kusurin Damu, so then it shouldn't go back because it was the Shchimir who said it, so it should work. Rav Yosef Mokila Bebari. What Rav Yosef does, he actually established this whole case was actually talking about a bari. It wasn't talking about a case of a shchimira, it was talking about a case of a bari. So instead of talking, so you're right. Maybe when it comes to divri shchimira, it won't go back to the shchimira because we say that we paskin that shchimira ksum kumsum. However, we're talking about a case of a bari, so in that case we see, again, the way we'll have to establish it is that hoyach is lav kazachi. I have a holy yarshim mishlech kaimer. It says it's yarshim. The kaimer mitzvah kaim dever ames. Tani yaksul l'mashaleach. So actually change it and say that it should go to the Mishalech, because he does hold that mitzvah kaim divrei hameis. It's a little bit challenging to flesh this all out. Again, we're trying to understand, again, the concept of halach lav kazachidami or kazachidami, and we don't establish it necessarily as a machlokas tanoim. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see a bunch of questions. Question 2. Bari. So the guy was healthy. Shemer hoylech man lapleinu meis hamashalech mahadin. So, since he's healthy, the question is whether or not we say hoylech kazachi or not. So the answer is there's four possibilities. Dalad machlokas. You could either say chayzon liyarshim mishalech. It goes back to the one who sent it, or denitnu lamisha mishalchu etzloi, or you should give it to the one who was being sent to, or yachloku, or shuda dedaini. So those are the possibilities. Again, yachloku, it's split in half. Shuda dedaini goes to one of the two people, the one that you think is best. Ma pasuk migmarul inin hoyach ikazachi or lav kazachi. So we end up saying the halach is Rav Shimon HaNasi. Therefore, hoylech is lav kazachi. As we said, we're talking about a case of a bari, and the reality is, since we're talking about a case of a bari, it goes back to him because hoylech is lav kazachi. So that's how we ended up establishing that lamaskana. Question T. Let's do TA first and TB afterwards. TA 12. Hoylech mana lapleini. V'halach l'bikshu v'lamatsu. V'chachamit marmi yachloku. Divided. Madua yachloku l'man demaiki babari umeis noisin b'chayim akabel. Why does he say yachloku? Why should he say it should be split up? So obviously the answer is because he was masupuk. He wasn't sure what the din is. Now, what din is? So let's see how he writes this. Masafka luhu I hoylech kazachi, or mitzvah kaim dever ames, right? So if we're talking about a case of a bari, and therefore the whole machlokas is whether you hold that hoylech is kazachi, or, and therefore that's the suffix, that's why yachloku, or do we hold that we're talking about whether he died and it's mitzvah kaim dever hames, again assuming we're talking about a person who is even a bari, right? But nonetheless he died. Right, since he died, do we say divri mitzvah kaim divri meis? Again, if we're talking about a shchimira, it could be a third scenario. Okay, TB. Last question 13. Why would you say that even while the mishalech is still alive, zacha makabel, that the makabel should accept it? Because kol oimer et zekil omer tenu, which what I'm basically saying is hoylech kazachi dami, or zehadin b'mamash shlashtan. This is totally not correct. So again, in the say, I don't know why I wrote that. I guess I try my best. But again, hoylech mana laploini v'hoylech bishabul matzu. So one says yarsh mishnah shnolech etzloi because you hold hoylech is kazachi dami. or the reason is because maybe we're talking about a shchivira, it's considered ksum masurin, or even if we're talking about a bari, if let's say the guy died, so the din will also be mitzvah kaim divrei sadkan.